Social media sells us that you need to be seen in the nicest car, wearing the nicest clothes for people to perceive that you're doing well. Well, my question is, does what someone else thinks mean more than what you should be thinking?
We all have a kind of money story, or we have an origins, or money had meaning to us, as we grew up and so forth. So I'm really curious, what's your historical money story?
I come from a household where money was never discussed as a topic. It was always a topic of contention, actually. There was a lot of stress around money, a lot of worry and anxiety around money. When I got my first job at 18, that led me to be homeless. I spent a good number of years in Canary Wharf, building investment portfolios as a financial advisor, advising wealthy people. The world that you're looking at is not going to shift for you. If you're not participating in the ecosystem, it's very easy to stand on the sidelines and be, that's absolutely evil. That does not work. That's unjust. Life happens to us from here, from our heads. And if all we've got in our heads is, that's bad, that's not good, I'm not going to do that, you narrow your opportunities.
Do you think that a lot of men get stuck there because there's an internal deficit?
If you get to a point where you have all the money that you want and you're not happy, you're screwed. So what I always say to people is,
hello listeners, welcome back to another podcast episode. I have a wonderful guest with me, a man I've just described to you. So I'm going to dive straight into the conversation. So Pia, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, man. I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I am straight from the gym actually before this. So feeling a tad warm sitting here. But other than that, I am doing wonderfully good.
Good.
So you're a man who is a real expert in the area of money, something that I think a lot of men that I speak to wish they were more experts in, or maybe they're scared of money. But I guess the first question that's kind of burning in me is, with this idea that we all have a kind of money story, or we have an origins, or money had meaning to us, as we grew up and so forth. So I'm really curious in terms of your story and what's your historical money story?
Man, it's not necessarily a good one. I think it's trauma-led more than anything else, trial and error, like most of us do. Trying to figure out what place it fits, how to use it, how to optimize it. A lot of that in my very, very early years wasn't clear at all. I come from a household where money was never discussed as a topic. It was always a topic of contention, actually. There was a lot of stress around money, a lot of worry and anxiety around money. And that definitely manifested in my adult years when I started doing really, really well. But I was very, very poor with money. I didn't even understand basic money budgeting, money in, money out, what you should and shouldn't spend. When I got my first job at 18, that led me to be homeless. So given where I am right now, it's a full 180, which is pretty crazy, but it's been through a mixture of experience and it being my job to kind of know these things. But even in your work, sometimes you don't apply what you know. So it takes an epiphany, a moment of realization to be like, hang on a second, I need to apply some of the knowledge that I've got here.
It's easy to have knowledge and not necessarily apply it to ourselves, right? Because like you said, sometimes there's a trauma that's involved, there's a wounding, there's stories. Like we can go into an office and be great financial managers of other people's money. And then when it comes to us, there's emotion and feeling that's involved.
Yeah, 100%. I think the emotion and the feeling attached to it is probably the biggest hurdle to get over more than anything else. I mean, what I always say to people is the what and the how to do. Actually, let's separate those things. The what to do is simple. The how to do it is more difficult because with the how, you have to get around the emotion and the psychological, mental restraints or barriers that we grow up with. The research shows that financial habits are locked in at age 7. So unbeknownst to us as kids, we notice things, pick things up. And it's okay when you're a kid because you're not actively dealing with money. But when you're an adult, you're earning money, you need to put that money to good use. Those old memories, observations, they come home to roost if you haven't, addressed or been equipped with the skills. So the how is so much more difficult. And particularly in 2026, where you've got ChatGPT, you've got Claude and all of these AI bots, they will give you the what, but how do you do it? How do you go about doing it when you think about all of the baggage that it comes with?
Yeah. And when you say 7, I'm transported back to my own life when I was 7 years old. And I'm like, God, all I heard my mum My mum's a religious woman, goes to church, you know, spent a lot of time in church when I was a young man, and people talking about, you know, what's that saying? It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than to a rich man to go to heaven. How do I still remember this phrase? Sitting in church, I can visualize it, you know, hellfire, you're going to go to hell for this and sin for that. Like, I remember this phrase, and I don't think I've picked up the Bible in maybe 25, 30 years, but I still remember this phrase I heard time and time again about rich people and camels and needles.
Bro, I've got to ask you, so what's your background?
My parents are Jamaican.
Okay,
my mum's
cool.
Jamaican, so
All right.
Pentecostal church.
Yeah. So like my parents are Nigerian, so the whole African, Jamaican, Caribbean type thing, it's very, very similar to a certain extent, especially from a religious point of view. I spent 10 years in Nigeria where it was like church 3 times a week, Bible study. And like, you're right, those are the types of things that you get when you're a kid growing up in a religious household. And it's really interesting because you still remember it. So as an adult, where let's not, beat about the bush, money is important for the lifestyle. Money is important for all the things that make life comfortable, right? But with that ingrained in the back of your mind, when you start going for higher paid jobs, or where you get to the point where you have to ask for more money, or you're running your own business, those things don't help at all. They can be quite counterintuitive, actually.
Yeah, totally. Because you suddenly have to, I feel you're faced with this, well, if I start to move into these echelons of wealth and money and income, what does that mean about who I am? Because if only bad people make money, which I think is a lot of in Britain, there's the kind of story, I think, especially now, I don't think I've ever seen such a anti-wealth, anti-rich sentiment in my life. There's an assumption that if you've made billions or millions, that you are automatically bad and you've been taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
And I guess I wonder how this affects people who are trying to kind of maybe move up the levels of life and so forth, and be upwardly mobile when they've heard in the news and they've heard their parents, maybe they have working class parents, they have Caribbean or African parents, tell them that money is evil and people with money are evil. How that kind of creates a glass ceiling for people.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack there, dude. Like, mate, where do we even begin? I think there's a lot of unlearning to be done, and just seeing the world for what it is. I do stuff on social media, so obviously I see the periodic ideology or trains of thought reflected in my comment section, and it's quite interesting how it changes over time. Particularly right now, there is this narrative that everything is a conspiracy. That, the government does not want you to do well. That they want you to be poor. That they want you to be in a specific demographic. I just don't believe that to be true, because it's not what I've witnessed. It's not what I've seen, right? And I think you have to unlearn that train of thought and see the world for what it is. I mean, let's talk about, billionaires and millionaires. My background in financial services is I spent a good number of years in Canary Wharf in the investment world, right? Building investment portfolios as a financial advisor, advising wealthy people. And I think when you get into those environments, you start to realize that there is a different world depending on your perspective. Your responsibility is to shift your perspective so you understand it. The world that you're looking at is not going to shift for you. And that's the big thing. So for me, money is the root of all evil. So all of a sudden, it's like, hang on a second. So these people are making all this money. I'm advising them, so they must be evil. Actually, a lot of them aren't. Most of these wealthy people that have done so well, the billionaires of this world, if you look at what they've really done, they've created like industry, right? Companies. And you can question as to whether or not Amazon is a prime example. Amazon in its rise, changing the marketplace so that, small companies really can no longer compete. I completely get that. And maybe there are rules and regulations, non-compete or competitive rules that need to be applied to that market. But if you really think about it, and I do this from an investment point of view, Jeff Bezos is one of the richest guys in the world, right? But that billionaire has created hundreds and hundreds of millionaires. And if you invested in Amazon, you would have made a lot of money in Amazon. So in a way, there's this weird ecosystem that exists. And I think if you're not participating in the ecosystem, i.e. you've not kind of changed your perspective to try and understand that world, it's very easy to stand on the sidelines and think, that's absolutely evil. That does not work. That's unjust. It's because you don't understand the ecosystem to take part. And that's one of the key things I often talk about in terms of education, and not allowing yourself to be pigeonholed into a particular way of thinking, because life happens to us from here, from our heads. And if all we've got in our heads is, that's bad, that's not good, I'm not going to do that, you narrow your opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say about Amazon, because, I worked in tech for 16 years. So I met loads of these Amazon people who worked for Amazon that became millionaires from working for Amazon and having shares as part of their package. And they were just regular people.
Yep.
Regular people like you and me. We don't always think of the fact that someone like Jeff Bezos has created, like you said, he's created millions of millionaires probably by now, right? Whether that's people that have worked for them or so forth, or you think of a company like ASOS, for instance, I know quite well. It's another company, they've generated all this money and they've done all this good, and they've, they probably have hurt certain types of parts of our high street, but they've also generated wealth for people who have been able, like you say, to participate in that, who've had the foresight, the ability, the knowledge, or the courage to start to learn and invest in companies as they see them, which is something that we just don't really learn to have, that courage with, like you said, like courage, courage with money, but also how to invest. These are skills that are not really taught to us through, schooling, because for some reason we kind of feel often as parents, we think schooling should teach our kids everything and there's no responsibility on the actual parents. And something that I've observed, and I'd love to get your take on this, is the wealthy people that I've met, their parents unconsciously, or just part of the environment they live in, they talk about money, they talk about commerce, they talk about investments, they talk about making money. I have a friend of mine, he told me a story of how he remembers his dad used to take him to the properties that he owned, that his dad owned, when he was like 7, 8 years old, to collect rent. So his whole childhood, he remembers going into places, and then at a certain point when he got to like 11 or 12, his dad would stay in the car and he would send him in to go and collect the rent. Yeah. So he started to have this like embodied experience of asking for money, talking to he said there were times where they would say, we don't have enough money, like I've only got this much, is that okay? And he would have to decide what to say and how to act, and then go back to his dad. And he got this education of money that was completely just part of the day-to-day life. And I think that's something that's really missing. Well, if you don't have the education yourself, you can't impart it to those around you.
Man, listen, this is where we start getting into the conversation on social mobility. So your friend, you said this was happening before he was 11, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so how well is he doing now as an adult?
He's doing very well.
Right, okay. So,
yeah.
And this is where we can talk about communities, right? If I look at the community, the Black community, African-American culture, whatever it might be, right? I remember watching films like Baby Boy back in the day, right? I don't know if you remember the scenes of, it's all about guns and butter. They're talking about the guns, the things that appreciate in value. When I first watched that film, didn't understand what that meant. Didn't understand what it meant. And I think there are references throughout cultures that highlight these things. The trouble is it doesn't register. In that film, he also talks about, are you a buyer or you're a seller? The world moves forward in transactions, commerce. I watched that so many years ago. Didn't understand what the hell it meant at that time. Again, there are references there. And whilst they're in media, they're in culture, granted, it was a very, very different time. But I think when you look at social mobility, the household has a huge role to play in that. Because if you can pick things up from your parents or from your community that you're close to, those things have a much better chance of being long lasting. Whereas I think, in white communities where there are properties and investments and that type of thing, they become a natural conversation as part of, we're going to teach our kids this because they're going to inherit something, so they need to understand it. I think in the Black community, that doesn't necessarily exist. And it's really, really fascinating because social mobility isn't just about being able to get a better job and earn more money. For me, social mobility starts with understanding exactly what to do with your money the minute you're able to earn it. Because I know plenty of people who are earning 100, 200, 300,000 pounds a year. They're still broke. And unfortunately on social media now, this whole thing, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds a month. Bro, if you're spending it all, you're broke. And I know plenty of people like that, especially here in Dubai. You know, these guys are driving around in Lamborghinis. They don't have any money, but the Lamborghini is the flex, right? It's nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense. And social media sells us that, well, you need to be seen in the nicest car, wearing the nicest clothes and doing all of these things for people to perceive that you're doing well. Well, my question is, does what someone else thinks mean more than what you should be thinking? And the answer to that should be no. Who cares if you rock up in a Audi A3 and your friend has got a C63 AMG? If he's got that on debt and he hasn't got any money in the bank, but you have got money in the bank because you're in your A3 or whatever it might be, who's better off? You are. But unfortunately, social currency doesn't uplift or highlight that other situation where you've got your head on straight and you're doing the right things from a financial point of view. Social mobility is depending on so many things. And unfortunately, I don't think we paint the right picture or expose ourselves to the right kind of things. We're too easily influenced in our thinking and led in our thinking. Maybe it's we don't have enough role models. I don't know. Maybe that's a concern as well too.
Yeah, the influence and being led, I think, is a really big piece, because I think of, now we have social media. But if I kind of transport myself back 20 years, I'm 41 years old.
Oh, right. Okay. You're a few years behind me, mate. I thought you were younger than that, bro.
I go back to then, and I think it was music, right? It was music culture, in London, music culture. And it's this kind of general culture of what I will call kind of working class culture, maybe hood culture, of you wear your wealth, you show your wealth, right? You buy the nice car, you have the nice clothes, you wear when I was young, it was crazy mosh, right? You wear the stuff, you show people how wealthy you are, right? Yeah. And I've always seen as this kind of almost like poverty mentality, because there's an internal poverty. I don't believe of my value, so I need to convince everybody else. You said, I need to change other people's idea of my value. But behind the scenes, everything's on HP and credit cards, and I'm living in a 1-bedroom flat with my 2 or 3 siblings, right? Or I'm living on my mother's sofa type of thing, which is the complete wrong way round that say, for instance, if you speak to people who really have wealth or live, it's the literally opposite way around that they live. Yeah,
look, bro, listen, my role models were Diddy, were Biggie, Tupac, Nas. Those are my role models in the music world, right? In the music culture. So it's you wear your wealth. When you're earning well, you go out and buy a nice car, you wear the jewelry so that people can see that. Those were my role models. So when I got to Canary Wharf in 2012 and I started earning really well, I'd spend stupid money on trainers. I'd bought a pair of trainers, Giuseppe trainers for £1,000. Why? I'd go on my lunch break downstairs and buy a suit for £1,000. I needed to be the guy in the office, partly because I didn't feel that I fitted in there. I mean, I was lucky to get to Canary Wharf. I don't have a university degree. And when you get into an environment like that, all of my peers, most of my peers were Eton educated, university degrees, ex-traders. So in my head, and I still believe this till today, there isn't saying that this is wrong, but I think first impressions are very important. So in the workplace, I was very much about, okay, I need to turn up with the right impression. So sharp suit, coordinate properly, because it is important. And so I would go spend money on an expensive suit because that first impression was absolutely key. And it definitely served me well, for sure, in terms of my reputation in the office. They knew that I did good work. They knew that I didn't speak much, but when I spoke, there was something important that they needed to take note of. It's crafting and fitting into an environment that I think I didn't really belong in because I don't have a university degree. And, on the 50th floor, One Canada Square, there were 3 people of color, the entire floor. And there's probably, 300 people on that floor. So, getting there against my background, yeah, I'd spend stupid money on suits and trainers and all this kind of stuff because, hey, I'm finally here. I used to be homeless once upon a time, like working Canary Wharf and One Canada Square. You crazy. Like, this is my chance to shine. And I think for most people will go through that phase where they start to earn money that maybe they didn't necessarily believe that they could. And I do think you've got to kind of get it out of your system because otherwise, if you don't, I think it's still just there in the back of your mind. But I quickly got to the point where it's like, actually, you know what? These things don't make you any happier, and that's an internal thing.
Mm. Do you think that a lot of men get stuck there at that place of, now I'm earning the money, I'm showing the world that I have money, because there's an internal kind of deficit, internal void, and they kind of get stuck in that place of show to the world without dealing with the internal void?
For sure, man. Look, I think, as dudes, as men, right, we always have this provider complex or this idea we've got to be providers and all of that stuff. And I think maybe even more so today than it used to be, there is very much an onus on showing your value and showing your wealth and showing that you're at a certain level, particularly if you want to be, you want to date or whatever it might be. I think that is definitely a true thing. And it's weird because I speak to a lot of 20-somethings. I went to an event last year and a couple of guys, they just started their own business. They were like, oh, you know what? We're doing really, really well. We want to buy homes, but at the same time, we live in London. We want to go out. We want to have fun. And, the girls that I like, they like guys with a bit of cash and all that kind of stuff. It's like, and I just said, listen, I can't tell you how to live your life, but you need to find the balance there immediately. Like, if you go into a club buying tables and popping bottles, you really need to think about that. You really need to think about that because at the end of the day, yeah, look, you're going to feel good all of a sudden for, 2 hours. But what does that do long term? I think as men as well, particularly when you're earning really well, you can fall into this fallacy that this is everlasting. It's great to earn good money. But the reality is a lot of people are 1 or 2 paychecks from being destitute, having nothing, because we don't do the fundamental things that give us financial stability and financial security when we get to the point where we are earning good money. And that right there is a very, very, very dangerous position to be in. Footballers are a prime example. How many of them go broke, get divorced after they finish playing? Because they have high earnings, even bigger outgoings because of their lifestyle, but they've not put the foundations in place around their finances. And it's really, really sad to see.
Yeah. It's so true, right? There's so many things you said there I think are really interesting. And the last thing there you said is around, you earn good money, and footballers are such a prime example because their careers are at best, at best their careers are 15 years on average. Footballers' careers, when you look at the stats, it's actually really shocking because we think of Premier League footballers, but we forget about those lower league players that like get 7 years who are earning less than the average wage, many of them, or just above, but they only have a career of maybe 7 to 10 years. We don't put the foundations because we're living above our means, which is something that, like you said, the guys you spoke to, the younger kids, because what I find interesting about them is that that's no different to when I was 21, where, you would meet guys who would, like you said, they buy tables, champagne bottles, sparklers, and then they'd sit on that table. It would be the end of the month and they would blow half their paycheck to attract a few women towards them who would drink their drinks and then walk off when it was all finished because they were trying to do it for the show. And they haven't found balance in, like, what you talk about a lot is like investing and so forth. So that's also super interesting. But the thing I want to actually dive a bit deeper into is this provider piece, because I was thinking this actually earlier. I was in the gym and I was thinking about a conversation, and I feel like there's been this real shift over these years, like of my adult life. I remember, and I always put it through the lens of Destiny's Child and Beyonce, right? When I was a kid, Beyonce was singing, bills, 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 pay my bills, yeah? And then Beyonce was singing, I'm an independent woman. I don't need no money, blah, blah, blah. But I've definitely seen in my own life, dating and now being in a relationship and being like a relationship and dating coach, where when I was 20 something, especially in my mid 20s, women would fight me to pay half of the bill because they were like, no, I got my own money. I'm doing my own thing. I don't need you to pay for me. And I'd be like, yeah, cool, no problem. And that kind of went on for a number of years. And now we flipped back into this idea of the provider man because, and there's a lot of talk about, women, I hear women say, oh, we do makeup and we buy clothes. So a man should pay for the date, so he should be paying. But it's actually that's just an excuse. Like we're seeing this reinvention of the provider man or the desire for a man who provides. And I'm very interested in how this impacts men's, like I know from my side, and I imagine you have a different lens, like how this impacts men's psyche around money and their value and worth.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something I see all the time when I do coaching with people, and it's very, very interesting because I've seen instances where, I've had coaching clients, and I'll give you a prime example. I won't say a name or anything like that, but, you got two people in the relationship, him and her. They have a house together, joint bills on that house. The career of the woman has done better than the man. They're now thinking about a second property, but the woman wants that property in her name and her name only because the man isn't doing as well. So in this dynamic, you then have the man being like, okay, I need to earn more money. I should be doing more. And the woman in that situation trying to secure her own assets under her own name, even though they're in a partnership. And I think it's really, really hard. I think for men these days, I think it's one of those situations where you kind of have to know where you're at and you have to have a good sense of you, really, to be honest. And you have to almost be aware of what you can and can't do and what stage of life you're at. You're not going to be able to magic high earnings out of nowhere. You have to be incredibly motivated, incredibly focused, and incredibly aware of the type of person you want to attract. I mean, I can't speak on the women's side because there is a story there on the women's side around, inequality and you're not being able to earn as much as the man. But I do find it very curious that you come into the world where, can you pay my bills? Bills, to independent to now all of a sudden, dudes have got to be earning 150, 200,000 pounds. It's ridiculous. Like, think about the top earners in any population. If you're earning, I think it's 55,000 pounds in the UK, you're the top 10% of earners. Just pause there, right? And you will hear on social media that if you're not earning 100 grand, 200 grand, you're nothing. Give me a break. Give me a break, dude. I mean, come on, bro. So what does that do for the young men out there? It tells them that if you're not earning enough money, you're worthless. If you're not earning enough money, you don't qualify to be dateable or to be deemed as a man. It's crazy. And obviously, social media amplifies that kind of voice and that kind of ideology. I think you've got to be really rooted in reality and take what you see on social media and what you hear on social media as a pinch of salt, but also be very, very aware of you and what your trajectory is early. I think if there is a positive to come out of this, it is the fact that a lot of guys will be very clear on what they want to achieve a lot sooner than perhaps I was aware of what I wanted to achieve because the pressure's kind of on. And not just in the dating pool, but in the pool of you want to buy a house. Well, if you're in London, you got to be earning good money because if you're on 100 grand, good luck. It's probably not going to be enough. It's going to sharpen focus, I think, for a lot of men.
Yeah. It's what I see is very similar. Like a lot of guys, and I have to encase this in the idea that as men, we are taught from a very young age, our value is in what we can produce. This is all over the world. This is very clearly in our culture. You know, it's only now we're starting to say we want a man of good character. You know, for many years it was like, really, it's a man who can produce, whether that's looking after his family, whether it was, you know, what he could create in the world, you know, a man's production and his value. So a lot of men are so rooted in their money is their value. And I see a lot of guys I speak to is they unconsciously lack internal value about themselves. They use money as their barometer of value. And then they date or they get into relationships and they lead with money because that's the thing they think is the only thing of value about them. And then they find themselves with the sort of woman who financially doesn't align with what they want and where they're going. And it can create a lot of turmoil is a good word that I'm seeing. But it also seeps into men who they're like, well, women only want men who want, you know, making 200 grand a year. And I'm often having to be like, is that really true? Has a woman said that to you? Or did just some 22-year-old on Instagram say that so she could get more likes? Versus the reality of women in the world, because we have so much wrapped up around our value as a man with money, and then we either lead with it unconsciously because we don't think who we are matters, or we project it out onto the world and get frustrated and angry. And I'm not taking away that I think there also is an importance in a man having a capability to create resources, because if you're going to have a family, that's something you're going to need. But I think as men, sometimes we overstate the importance of money because of our own lack of kind of self-confidence often in the relational world.
For sure. I mean, I think on social media, there is definitely that area. I mean, look, I'm in my older years now, so I don't really have a wide circle of like friends or anything like that, really, to be honest. But I think if you're in your 20s right now in that pool, I think you have to be very, very clear on how you vet that. I did a conversation with the guys at Deep on YouTube about a year ago, and they asked me what's one thing that is a complete waste of money. I went, first dates. Coffee.
Yeah.
She says no. That's a great sift. Pay for coffee, and if it's not good enough, probably the wrong type of person. And I think you've got to be confident enough to be able to use that as a barometer. And I say that because, you know, back in the day, when I was dating, I was in Canary Wharf. So, you know, it's one of those situations where it's like, I blew a lot of money on dates, on women that just, my God, what's the point? Like, it's ridiculous. So coffee, if that's not good enough, you're probably dodging a bullet anyway. But I think it takes confidence to be able to do that. And it means that you have to not be, I guess, blinded by the physical attraction to a certain extent, and be confident in yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a big fan of coffee dates, and I'm a big fan of telling men to be creative with their date choices that aren't just about money, because often we'll fall into, oh, I need to go on a first date, I need to go to a fancy restaurant, a fancy bar, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, be more creative than that. You can really find things that cost next to nothing, you know, but we aren't creative. We just go straight to the like money piece. Like, what am I going to spend? What's going to make me look good and going to impress her is, I think, a story, especially I think as men, we're growing up in our 20s where we're still finding who we are, can be really difficult. But I deeply agree with what you say. It's like, first dates are a waste of money. You're going to go on a lot of them and you never get that money back. It's an investment that goes down the drain if we look at it from an investment point of view. Like, it's up there to me, like cars.
Yeah.
Are one of the things I hate. I'm not a car man in the slightest. I don't care about cars. But I just seen so many men I've either coached or men I've been friends with use this car as this status symbol, and it goes very, very wrong. Like HP, big expensive cars, insurance that's like thousands of pounds and stuff like that as a surrogate for character.
Yeah. Listen, we can dive deeper into that, because I think, you know, I have definitely done the car thing for sure. I've definitely done the car thing. And for me, I'll tell you, I bought a Tesla in 2016, before Tesla was even big, right? I was the first person where I lived to have one of these things. It was rare. It was great. And the reason why I bought one was at the time I went to go see a client. And he goes, if you test driven one of these things, they are so quick. It's absolutely ridiculous. So me being me, I went to go test drive one. I was like, holy crap. What is this? I went looking for one. And I ended up dropping something like 15K as a deposit to go into this car, finance the rest of it. The finance agreement was more than my mortgage at the time by about £200. That was the last time I financed a vehicle in that regard. Because, look, there's a lot of narratives online. People will say you only live once, YOLO. I get it, okay? But I think it's really important to understand that as a guy, you have to measure your cloth accordingly. If you're earning £30,000, it is not normal to be driving a 50K car or a 60K car. It's not normal. And even though social media will tell you that it is, it's not. It's fucking crazy. I'm sorry, but it is, right? So people will use the examples of, this person and that person. But dude, you have no idea of their situation. Like, forget that. Focus on what you've got. If you're on 30K, do not be looking for a 50, 60K car. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And thinking about the monthly payment that you're going to have to use. I mean, these things, man, like car finance is an absolute trap if you've got the balloon at the end as well. Like most people didn't even prepare for the balloon. So if you don't play the balloon, what are you going to do? All of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I've got 10K that I need to go find. For an average person, 10K is hard to come by. Like, we've got to be a lot smarter than this stuff. It's not about, it makes you feel great when you're driving a car like that, mate. I mean, look, it was the first test that I used to get people stop me all the time. Like, what is this? Like, this thing floating by in complete silence. And mate, it was black. I had it all blacked out. It had black wheels. It looked a monster. And it was one of the quickest ones at the time, right? This 0 to 60 was like 3.2 3.2 seconds. Mate, I would kill a Porsche. It was beautiful. And yes, it was nice to be like, yeah, that's my car. People paying attention to it. But at the end of the day, I look at them like, it's more expensive than my mortgage. If I put money into Tesla that year, by the way, and held it for that period of time, don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
Yeah. Let's talk about that one, actually. Because when we're thinking about we spend money, right? People are spending money on clothes, cars, makeup, all the stuff people spend money on. But yet we won't set up some sort of, maybe we could set up a direct debit, for instance, with some platforms where we are invested in their stock on a regular basis. Like, what are some of the decisions we can make, like very simple ones in our lives, to start turning what could be liabilities like cars, clothes, into potentially like assets with the cash that we have or we can spend?
Look, I think the first thing is trying to get round and acknowledging straight off the bat that as human beings, we all live in the now. It's all about what's happening right now and in the present. What makes us feel good, what makes us feel rewarded, and what makes us feel successful in the now. As human beings, we're not very good at planning or thinking 2 years down the line, let alone 10, 15 years. We're just not wired in that way. I think you have to acknowledge that first and foremost. And the way I always position it with the people that I coach with is, we sit down and do an exercise. Let's not think 10, 15 years necessary into the future. What's important in the next 1 or 2 years? A lot of people want to buy homes now, right? Property prices are out of control. Deposits are hard to come by. But people who are in good enough jobs where they do have the ability to save enough money, okay, if the goal is to buy a home, okay, so do you really want to be driving around in a RS5 or whatever it might be? Or do you want to own a home? Which are the two? Most people, when you have a sensible conversation, will be like, actually, the house is more valuable than the car, which is 100% correct. House will appreciate in value, cars will lose value, okay? The craziest thing that I'm seeing on social media now is the amount of people that are telling youngsters not to save for deposit, that it's not worthwhile owning a home. I'm like, please give me a fucking break. I mean, a lot of the guys who say this are from the States, and the market is completely different. The countries are completely different. I've been a financial advisor, so I understand that. I've sat down with people in retirement, planning for their retirement, and if they didn't own a home, and you haven't got enough in your pension or any investments, you're done. You're cooked. Because there isn't an asset that has been, appreciating value over time. So I think it's about priorities. If you have priorities, what you need to do is actually quite clear. The how is often what people struggle with. But if you have no priorities whatsoever, you're in no man's land because you don't really know whether you're going right, left, front, forward, backwards. You're just reacting on what you might be influenced to do on social media or whatever it might be. So you've got to really dial in, like really, really, really dial in and try and figure out what's the best use of your money in conjunction to where you actually want to be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years from now, and being extremely clear on how you document and hold yourself accountable. And that's kind of what I do now and something I'm going to be doing within the community that I'm launching as well this year.
And it's quite simple. Like, I know obviously it's not, the implementation is different from how it is. It's not a complex structure you're expanding. You're like, get clear on priorities, values, goals, where you want to be, and then start to make those, what I'm hearing is like small decisions and choices that are in alignment with those like goals and priorities.
100%. I mean, look, everyone, regardless of your walk of life, has a moment where you have an epiphany. And the epiphanies, they might happen 2 or 3 times, generally speaking, in life. But each of those moments will require you to make a difficult decision. I think now on social media, one of the positive things about social media is those epiphanies are coming a lot sooner for a lot of people and earlier in life than for a lot of people. And it could be something as ridiculous as you're simply in the wrong circle. You're not surrounding yourself with the right people. And you're not focusing on making sure that you are putting yourself in those right circles. I'll give you a prime example. There was a point in life where I decided, you know what, I've got to leave my group of mates behind, because we were just going out clubbing every week, getting drunk, getting into fights, pulling girls. And like, there's only so much that you can do this for. And I decided to myself, actually, hang on a second, I'm better than this. So I pulled out. And they hated me for it. But if I look at where I am now and where some of those guys are in prison. One of them's dead, right?
Wow.
So what would happen to me if I was in that same environment? And that's an epiphany. That's a moment of clarity. And I think you really have to be clear on what it is that you want for yourself. And putting yourself around the right people is 100% important, especially on social media, the content you're consuming. If you're consuming the wrong kind of content, it's going to lead you down the wrong path. So you need to be very, 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 very clear on what you're exposing yourself to. A friend of mine used to say there are radiators and drain pipes, 2 types of people in the world. Unfortunately, social media, for most purposes, are what you would class down as a drain pipe. It does nothing but make you feel bad. It doesn't necessarily motivate you. And if it does do anything at all, it makes you feel as though you're not good enough. You have to prove and validate yourself. Whereas what you want is radiators, basically. People, things that inspire you, that encourage you, that put you in a positive frame of mind to pursue the things that you want. But you've got to be really intentional around that. I mean, I have no drain pipes in my circle. None. If you complain too much, you're not my friend. You're not my friend if you complain too much. If you're talking about news and it's not in a way of, what's an opportunity here or what could be done, you're not my friend. And that might sound really, really harsh, but you are the sum of the people that you surround yourself with. That's just facts, unfortunately.
And their way of being seeps into your mind, your mentality, how you act, how you respond. You know, if the people around you are telling you, back to what I said earlier, that all rich people are evil, you will start to believe that as well.
Of course, you're never going to own property. You're never going to be able to aspire to make good money that could be transformational for yourself and for your family. You're never going to be exposed to that. And this is where, again, social mobility is very, very important. Because it's not necessarily about the money, it's about the ideas, the environment that you expose yourself to. It doesn't start with earning more money. It starts with knowing what to do with the money the minute you earn it. Like, the education is very important. You know, if you earning, this is something I hear a lot, and I've heard my friends say a lot over the years, and I challenge all of the time. And this is whether they're trying to pay down debt or whether they're trying to get on a poverty ladder. It's always the same thing that I used to notice. I need to earn a little bit more money. I'll pay down the credit card, or, you know, I'll save a little bit more once I earn a little bit more money. And then they earn more money. I need to earn a little bit more money. So they don't actually change. And it's like, if you can put fundamental routines, habits in place, like, and this is the one thing I wish someone told me when I was 18 years old, when I got my first job. Pete, you're getting paid X amount, put 5% or 10% into this account here. And it doesn't, at this point, it doesn't even matter whether it's invested or not, but a percentage, 5 or 10%. The reason for that is because I was 18 at the time. When I got to 25, I was earning way more money. But actually, 5% of a larger amount is much bigger in monetary terms than what I was earning when I was 18 years old. And that habit has the ability to compound. You now build on top of that the ability to then understand how investing works, so you put it into the markets. Now we're talking completely different game altogether, and different decisions, different prospects for the future. And so, yeah, social mobility and having these conversations in the community around that is really important. We need to get away from social mobility as having a nice car or wearing designer gear. It's not.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I want to change tact a little bit, actually, towards this piece around kind of relationships and money, because I think if I remember rightly, one of the most common reasons for divorce is around the relationship with money, right? And the difficulty around that. And I guess a question I have for you based on that is it about the actual money itself and how much money there is, or is it more about a mismatch between the two people in a relationship and their stories about money and their purposes and their priorities around money? And maybe there might be a third thing that I've not mentioned and it could really be grounded in.
I think it's more, in most cases, a mismatch, and not necessarily understanding where there might be a misalignment, or perhaps a lack of prioritization. I think you got to work in tandem. I think that's really important. And, you know, because we don't get taught about money, and, you know, as a society, especially in Britain, we have this stiff upper lip kind of mentality where we just don't talk about it at all. You know, Americans are very, very different. They're very braggadocious about this kind of stuff, because in America, earning well, doing well is a sign of success. And that is a good thing. It's something that you do want to shout about. In the UK and Britain, it's very, very different. So it's very much more understated. But I think not having an alignment, an understanding of where you've come from or where you want to go, that oftentimes is the big, big killer. It's interesting because I ran a poll last year, and I asked the question, would you marry someone who was in £50,000 worth of credit card debt? And the overwhelming answer was no, by like 80% of the votes. Now, that might sound pretty cold off top, because then you start asking questions, well, what about the person and love and all this kind of connection, right? But if you think about it, you then have to call into question of, okay, so how did you get into £50,000 worth of debt? What are the habits that led you there? What are the things that you don't necessarily understand that added to that? And if you are going to get married, you know, officially, that liability becomes your own, because now your credit scores and everything are tagged together. So that then impacts your ability to buy homes. If that's important to you, it impacts your ability to do other things. So there has to be a clear alignment, really, to be honest. And I think it has to be something that you speak about, especially if there's like huge debts and things like that in the background. Because, yeah, the divorce rates are absolutely huge.
And it's interesting, that 50K worth of credit card debt, right? Because it's not just the debt itself, it's what it means. And our relationship to debt as well is one thing. But like, what does it mean? You make bad decisions with money, you're using credit card debt irresponsibly. Like, how are you going to be? And I think this is where I sometimes talk to men about money a lot. And when I speak to them, it's like, it's not about the fact that you have money or don't have money. It's like, what are your habits around money?
Yeah.
As you know, you've mentioned quite a lot, but it's like 50K of credit card debt isn't just debt. It's like, what do we picture in our mind when we think of someone who has 50K of credit card debt? That's the thing I think was really interesting. Like, what do we imagine? Someone who is like going into Gucci and buying handbags? Or do we imagine someone who's got a really nice car that they put on credit card debt? Or do we just think of someone who's really irresponsible and doesn't have much financial literacy?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a load of friends who have been like this. I mean, the guy that I think comes to mind in my 20s was my friend then called Jay. And this guy, he was offered credit cards upon credit cards, and he had a trainer fetish. If he went into like First Direct or whatever, my JD, if he saw a pair of Adidas in his size, he would buy in every single color. And I'm like, dude, why? Like, going out on a Friday and a Saturday, he needed a new pair for Friday, a new pair for Saturday.
Wow.
And all of this was going on credit cards. So when you go into his house, literally it was just box upon box upon box upon box. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, there's a mixture of, there's an addiction to something there, for sure. Then there's almost this attitude of, I can shirk this responsibility, because in opposed to addressing something is, I'll take out more. And for a lot of people, even some of my current friends, get into debt IVA, because it's an easy way out, but find themselves in the same situation a number of years down the line. So there's no of not actually breaking the habit or identifying what got you there. And I think that's probably the most scary thing. It's not being able to diagnose what the actual cause of the problem is. Because if you're ill and you don't know what's making you sick, it doesn't matter what you take. If you're not taking the right thing, you're still going to be in the same place. And I think when it comes to debt specifically, that is a huge, huge area to think about. Because it's not just about the number, and 50K on a credit card is pretty extreme. But even if you look at 25, 5,000, 10,000, like, it's what got you there, and it's maybe the lack of dealing with it that becomes more of an issue than the actual amount itself.
Yeah. Yes, they're not dealing with it. And I guess this feeds into this idea around financial transparency in relationship, in marriage. Like, how transparent should people be aiming for inside of their relationships, do you think?
I think transparency is 100% needed, for sure. I mean, there are different ways in which people approach this in terms of, do you have independence and or is everything kind of like bolted together? And there are different trains of thoughts on this. I mean, I think having an air of, independence is really important, because I think otherwise there is room for financial abuse. And that in itself it's a completely different subject. But I think it's something that you only come to by talking about it and kind of having that alignment, if you will, if that makes any sense. I mean, there is no right or wrong answer. It depends on your personal circumstances and what works for you in those circumstances more than anything else. And this is, again, where, you have to be a little bit careful in, the social media age around what is right for you. Because social media is great. I work on social media, but ChatGPT, Claude, they're great tools. They can give out so much. But again, it's the how and what is appropriate for your situation specifically.
Yeah. I see a lot of people afraid to be transparent about money and finance as they are dating, as they get into relationships, often through like a fear of judgment from the other person. But I find it one of those things that is really important. Like, I speak for myself personally. When I dated, I grew up in a household, as I've described, and no one talked about money. So when I finished university, I realized, I sat and I was like, I don't understand money. I don't understand money. So I bought about 4 books. One of them was this book of investments by the Sunday Times, the Financial Times, which is like a Bible. It was about 1,000+ pages. And I started to listen as I was dating people, as I got into relationships, like, how do people relate to money? And I started to be honest with the people that I was in relationship with, like this, when I've got these are my assets, I've got this, and this. And they would be really shocked and also taken aback that I was willing to just say what was there, because so many of us are so scared to talk about money and assets and our liabilities and what we do and don't have, that we all kind of move in this very murky world of like meeting someone and then we date and sometimes we move in together, but there's still no clarity between the two people about like what money they have, what money they don't have, how they're affording things, what they're using to pay for things. Do they use credit cards? Do they not use credit cards? Do they have a loan? The car they have, is that on HP somewhere that's sitting, so forth. Like there's not enough conversation between people to see if there is like an alignment, and this can cause huge, huge problems down the line. And I see this because I've seen people like on the brink of divorce because there's been financial lying, there's been hiding of money and assets, or there's just been there was like a pretense that someone actually was doing really well financially, but in fact they were doing really badly and they didn't want to kind of show that up in their relationship. So I feel that transparency is something that it's like one of the areas of when we talk about relationship that I think is one of the areas we don't talk about. We talk about, openness and honesty and we talk about in all the areas. But when it comes to finance, there's still so much money story that gets in the way of two people who are in a relationship or getting into one to actually being kind of honest with each other about what the state of play is for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, there is again, it comes back to the British culture of not really talking about this kind of stuff, really. Stiff upper lip, being quite, I guess it's impolite to talk about it. I think there's also there's an element of, when is the right time? Did you do that initially at the dating stage? For some people, they're like, yeah, let's go for it. But I think when you get to a meaningful point, you have to. There has to be transparency there for sure, especially if you're looking to buy homes or you're looking to build something together 100%. You're going to have to. And if there is debt or other things that are sitting there, the other person should know. Like my partner's a prime example. And again, different cultures, but she's Polish. She's never had a credit card. Whereas once upon a time, I struggled with credit card debt. And she's actually one of the reasons why in the end, I was like, actually, I need to buckle up and be like, I can't continue to do this, right? And I think when you look at it from that point of view, there are positives that people pull from each other. So it doesn't have to be this conversation that is wholly bad. There's an opportunity to learn from someone else and to take on different perspectives from someone else as well. I think sometimes this is always or sometimes positioned as a really difficult negative thing to talk about, whereas it needs to be reframed as a positive thing to talk about. Because that way you don't really leave any room for ambiguity or confusion or any nasty surprises. I've seen plenty of people who have got a lot of debt and have just not told anyone. And it's like, whoa, dude, like it is scary at that point. And, when you do coaching with couples, it's like, okay, so what's the way forward? Because it's no longer one person's responsibility once you're married, it's a joint responsibility. You've got to really be upfront with it.
And there's something you touched on there that maybe is starting to think, what are some of the healthy traits and values that we should be looking for in a partner and potential partner around money and finance, so we can kind of spot someone who is not just in alignment, because I think maybe that's but like someone who is going to treat money well as a partner and potential partner?
That's a really good question, actually. I mean, it will be different for different people because there are different people. And again, where you come from and your background has a huge part to play in this. So I gave my partner as an example. She's never had a credit card. And her philosophy is, if I don't have the money to buy it, why would I buy it on a credit card? It makes no sense. Please make it make sense. Why would I go borrow this money and then pay interest for this thing that, if you really boil it down, do I need it? Do I really need it? Probably no. So actually, I'll just go without it. Thank you very much. And that is a completely different mindset and a completely different way of life and a way of thinking because of background. I think in the Western world, the way we think about these issues is very, very different to Jamaica, Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. Like, we built countries on debt. Like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I think being able to kind of like have a window into that train of thought, which if you're dating from someone who's in a different country will be very cultural and very kind of like, there will be a national identity perhaps behind it, I think is very important. But you want to have someone, the biggest trait that I see that is the most important is someone who isn't going to be impulsive, who is perhaps in a position where it has to be now. Impulse. I used to be an impulsive spender. I've learned how to curb it now. But impulse gets you into a lot of trouble. If you're willing to go without, if you're willing to delay gratification, that in a partner is great, is a fantastic thing to aim for, particularly on the financial side of things, because that person will check you if you're impulsive. And if you're really in it together, well, you listen. At least you flex and you feel off each other. But if you've got two people who are just impulsive, let's do it now. We'll figure it out later on. Recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I have lived the impulsive spender before, but in those times it was within my means to be able to be impulsive. So much so that I created a pot of money that I could be impulsive with. I had a pot of money that was like play money, I call it. And I still have this pot of money called play money, which means that if I go to a shop and I'm like, I want that, I can go into this account and it's not one of my regular accounts. I have to go to a different app and I can go, I've got that money, boom, I'm buying it. It's done. Yep. Cool, I'm getting it. I've kind of planned for impulsiveness.
Yeah. And that's having systems, which is the how, right? So the what to do is easy to come by. It's the systems that allow you to be able to do that practically in the how. This is the thing, right? This is a lot about balance when we talk about finances, right? We're all going to have impulsive moments. I have impulsive moments sometimes still, not as much as I used to have, but sometimes I'm like, I really want to buy this thing. I bought a Louis bag recently. The missus was not happy, okay? But it was one of those things where it's like I'd seen it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I did the whole 24, 48-hour rule. That went and passed. Then like 3 months later on, I was still thinking about this thing and I'm thinking, oh, it's stupid money, but I've had a long year in business and like, okay, I want to go buy this thing. So I went and bought it, but I didn't buy it on credit cards. I didn't utilize any debt facilities to do it. I looked at the pot of money. I'm like, okay, it's only a small percentage of what I've got. So actually, I am going to buy this thing. And I think that's important because it's about discipline. You know, you've got to have the self-discipline yourself. Now, the missus wasn't happy, 100%. But I told her, look, I'm thinking of buying this thing, by the way. And I even went down the route of trying to find like a few fakes that look good and be like, okay, it's not exactly the same thing, but... But you know what I mean? But it's one of those things where she was aware of it. And like, yeah, she gave me a little bit of like, oh my God, I can't believe you just spent this money on this thing. But it's like, it wasn't done on credit cards. Yes, it's a bit of an impulsive thing, but I have systems in place that allow me to purchase them. And it's very, very rare that I would do that. I mean, I don't buy things that expensive ever now, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah. How important do you think it is for us to look for like good financial literacy in partners? Really
important. You've got to be on a level pegging for it to work long term anyway, I think. Because if you want to raise a family, you want to buy homes and all, you got to think about financial security. Like people say that money's not important, but it is. Money will not necessarily solve every problem, but it will give you choices to solve problems. And I think just in terms of peace of mind and having a sense of security, money will give you that. And I don't think that could be overstated in any way, shape or form. It's very, very different waking up in the morning having zero debt, or at least having zero toxic debt. So no credit cards, no overdraft, no payday loans. You might have a mortgage, but this mortgage is on a property that is appreciating in value. That's a very, very different world to waking up and you've got a shed load on credit cards, a shed load on HP, a shed load on payday loans. It's very, very different. And this is what I try and coach into people a lot of the time in the programs that I do, and certainly in the community that I'm launching. It's about understanding what that timeline looks like for you. What do you want to achieve? And taking away the things that are going to stand in the way and putting in the positive things in place that will actually get you there. And the beautiful thing is it's just a journey. Like everything that you learn in the pursuit of one goal is repeatable, because it's the same set of things that you do again, adapted slightly, but you're building a habit that ultimately has that long-term benefit. And so, yeah, I just think, you've got to have the right focus. You really, really do. And having that communication is important too.
Yeah. One last question I wrote this one out earlier. What are the kind of common money/finance mistakes that you see couples making?
Hiding things, I think, probably one. Maybe not talking enough about it, not being aligned on a couple of things, I think is really important. Is a common one that I've seen. I think most of it is made a lot easier when you have those three things not being a point of contention. Because everything else you can build around and build upon, to give you a direct kind of like route that aligned with everyone. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of so many instances in terms of the couples that I've actually coached here. And the example that I gave earlier around the woman who then wanted to buy a second property in her name, the partner didn't say it at the time, but you could see that it's kind of like, and I could read it from him, and just to the body language, he wasn't comfortable with that. Because the first property that is joint is actually his property.
Oh.
So it's like, I put you on my property, and now that you're earning well, and you want to have your property on your property. And
wow,
that, I don't coach in that capacity, but it's definitely a point of contention. And look, I can see it from her point of view. I can also see it from his point of view. But yeah, it's a huge point of contention. It really, really is. And just not being clear is a big one.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because my partner is also a coach, relationship and dating coach. She works with women. And we often say a sentence to each other so commonly, which is, if a man was doing that, we would call that some level of abuse or control or something that's nasty. But when a woman does it, we kind of go, well, she's protecting herself. But if this is one of those instances, if this was the other way around, we'd all be like, hey, this guy's trying to like hide from her, fleece from her, take from her, not treat as an equal and so forth. But it's such an interesting thing in couples around as they start to earn and one person starts to earn, and because it's like a trust piece there, isn't it? It's like a level of trust in there of, are you with me for the right reasons? Can I trust you in the future? Are we even really in this together in the long term? And obviously some of that's going to be based in that childhood, and if you've had you had a father who ran out and took money, or mother or so forth, it can be but it's like it starts to erode at this trust, this foundation of a relationship, when we start to make these decisions that benefit one person but don't benefit the other.
Yeah. I mean, and in that instance, it really came down, and I'm talking about to the couple case study there, it came down to the fact of earning, and her career got to the point where she was earning significantly more than him. So in that instance, it's also a case of, for the guy, it's like, okay, well, I've done well to this stage. Maybe there's a bit of emasculation going on, maybe, on his side, and him feeling not as confident as he should be because there is now a clear difference in earning potential. And this is, you know, you get into a completely different conversation there around, okay, so how does the woman now feel earning that much more? And essentially from an income point of view, earning more and almost being the high earner and almost the breadwinner in the family. That dynamic oftentimes doesn't always fit at all. That's a wider conversation to be had there. And, you know, speaking to him, it's like, you know, he said he was okay with it, but I don't think he was really okay with it. I think he would have been okay with it if the second home was going in joint names, but she was adamant, doesn't want it to go into joint names because that for her was her security. But it's like these properties are in London. So each of those properties, I mean, especially the one with the 50-50, it's almost paid off. It's a huge amount of equity in there. And
Wow.
the plan wasn't to release equity to buy joint. It was, I want this in my name. It was a very, very interesting situation and one that took a while to kind of like get to the bottom of in terms of, okay, look, because my job there was how do you prepare? What are the pitfalls, the things that you need to be mindful of in terms of preparation together? But yeah, that's a different conversation altogether. It's really, and I think there are a lot more instances like that now where women have the ability to earn more money than men in most cases. And I think as men, it's the reality check of what does that now mean for men in relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I had a conversation with a very successful coach actually on the podcast a while ago, and she said, you know, she retired her husband, as she put it, right? But in retiring him, there's exactly the same dynamic, is that she felt he was emasculated. He became a stay-at-home dad. And I think as she said it on the podcast, is like he lost his drive and purpose. And that really started to affect their relationship. They're no longer together. But I think this is something, a dynamic that's happening more and more with men and with women in relationship, where a woman starts to do really well. And if the man's value is steeped in, as we've said a few times, like what he makes, the amount of money, and that becomes too much and he doesn't have, like, what else do you bring to a relationship that feels like you are kind of contributing, that's not just finance? But this emasculation through money is quite common. And there's some research about this, and I can't remember what it is. It's like women who earn more than their partners are more likely to fake orgasms. That's definitely one of them. And there's something around anxiety. I think in men who earn less than their partners, anxiety is usually higher as well. But it is because it really points to this, like, this masculinity, right? This sense of masculinity that as men we deem through money providing. And then that becomes we're no longer the provider. Like, who are we to our family if we're not a provider? Like, who are we at our core? And if that isn't strong enough, then that will start to rock the relationship from a kind of togetherness and security point of view.
I would agree with that. And I think, you know, this might not be something that is addressed or fixed or in any way, meaningful way, tackled in this generation, because I think it fundamentally means that you have to raise boys differently with different ideas,
Yes.
really, to be honest. I was always told as a kid, and certainly as a teenager, that my responsibility was to look after the family, even though I didn't have a traditional upbringing. I was fostered from 3 months to 8 years old, taken over to Nigeria for 10 years, lived in a split household, mum and dad in different states, didn't really know my dad, didn't really know my mum, didn't really know my brothers, to come back to be told, well, you've got to now help everyone else. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. I've known you guys for 10 years, sporadically for 10 years, and now it's my responsibility to look after you guys, like, make it make sense. And then from being homeless and being in debt and just, you know, the value of and the importance of money became abundantly clear, particularly in situations where I was living on the streets, sleeping on the streets, and I sent a message to say, look, I'm in a really difficult situation. And coming from a religious household, the response was, we're praying for you. Now, praying for me does not help me when I'm in an alleyway on a seafront in Hastings, East Sussex, freezing my tits off. And then having to, off the back of that, realize I've got to fend for myself and that nobody's here to save me. And I think as a young guy, my mentality shifted, that it's all about being in the position where, number one, I can never be homeless again, and never put in my financial situation in the hands of somebody else. And I think as men, we all have our own different versions of that in some way, shape or form, combined with this idea that you need to be a provider, you need to be a leader, so on and so forth. I think as men, we probably need to be having different kinds of conversation around what that truly means and what else there is. Because for a lot of guys that I know, all of my friends, prime example, when you first meet someone as a guy, what do you do? In the first question, what's the first question we often ask? What do you do for a living?
Yeah.
What's the reason behind that? To kind of gauge what industry, what level, how much does this person earn? Yeah. There's always
how eligible they are.
Exactly, right? That needs to change. Because with the world as it is currently moving forward, that notion is not going to sit well enough. I don't think it's going to equip people well enough to be able to deal with what the world is changing into. And I think it's great when, men are the breadwinners, but in the changing world, I think there needs to be a wider and deeper conversation around not just value tied to money, but value tied to who you are. And I think fundamentally as guys, we don't talk, number one, like, how you feeling? I'm all right. But you and I both know you're not all right. Right?
Yep.
How you doing? Yeah, I'm cool. And it depends on how you say it, right? I'm cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Like the tone, you can just tell as a man when a guy says it, what you really mean,
Yep.
And yeah, there just needs to be a whole shift altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bit, as he said, we're moving into a world now where who a man is, his character, his values, how he operates in the world, treats people, I think it will become a higher currency in many parts of the Western world for a man. Not in all communities, but I think in a lot will start to shift away from this man as provider. It will be there in some places. I think it will always be there. But I think as women get more of a foothold in the working world, and I think it's only going up because women are great workers. I've worked in industries a lot, and women are very, very capable workers. We see it coming out of the school systems. And if a lot of men still ground their value in what they earn and what they do, then they're going to find themselves, and it's already happening, very disgruntled and angry at women when in fact they could work on some things that are, free to work on to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you get into the conversation of the whole manosphere, which I don't agree with at all. But I think when you look at the education levels, girls search forward more than boys, and like that can't continue. Like it really, really can't. And I just think that the whole dynamic, we need to think about that and look at that differently. We need to speak to boys differently. Because the whole manosphere space just really makes me laugh. I'm in Dubai, so you can imagine what it's like out here, dude. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And like most of these guys running around and just doing all this nonsense is to basically look like I am it. I mean, Andrew Tate is here. I remember with the missus, we went for Christmas Day. We went for Christmas lunch in downtown, and his Bugatti was downstairs.
Wow.
So it's like, you've got these people here. This is like, I guess, the hub where they all like to come to and stuff. And I think with kids and young boys being exposed to that isn't a positive thing. It's given the wrong kind of role model. It really, really is.
Completely.
And a lot of his focus, Tate specifically, is, got hundreds of millions of dollars. And yeah, that's great. To have that money and have that security is great. But what does it say to you about you as a person? The money does not mean that you can be an arsehole as a person. You still got to be a good man, a good person underneath it all. And my fear is that the younger generation will put the pursuit of earning money over the character that they need to cultivate and build as a human being. Not necessarily as a man, but as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you mention this. I'm doing a talk for a bunch of teachers today about men and boys. And this is very thing of like the role models we have and how easy someone like Tate is able to manipulate the system to appear to be a certain way because he gives a very simple ABC. Like, young boys, what do they want? They want, most young boys, especially in Britain, they're growing up poor. They see themselves not having the things they want. They're not attractive, they might be in their teens, so they're not attracted to the women that they're interested in. And a man comes along and says, I can tell you exactly how to get all of those things that you want. Just listen to everything I say. Or not even really listen to everything I say, because what he does is he speaks sense about 60% of the time. And I know some listeners are going to struggle with that, but he does. 60% of the time, maybe even 80% of the time, he's speaking sense, things you can nod and go, I agree with it. And it's the 20% of distortion that really is corrupting, because it's like, suddenly, if you believe the whole package, then you're into this distorted world where, feminism is the problem, and all you need is money and to be dominant. And actually what he doesn't teach at all is about the goodness of character, the importance of emotional literacy, the importance of building up who you are as a person and being decent to people, as well as, creating resources which are important.
Yeah. It's funny actually, because I will see his stuff online, and there was something that I saw, I think it was probably about a couple of months ago or so, and I was like, is this the same person? But he said something really insightful. And the thing he said was this. He goes, and this is a really important thing for like young men who may be listening to this. He goes, if you get to a point where you have all the money that you want and you're not happy, you're screwed. Because you would much rather, it's a better place to be when you don't have everything that you want, because you can still aspire to fix something, to develop, to be happy. But if you've got everything you want and you're not happy, what do? Where do you go? And this talks about, what's important. It's not just about money. You've got to have more character than that. So what really is that thing that defines you as a person, that makes you happy as a person, as a man? Because there's too much of an obsession over the money and the things that money can do and buy and the circles that it can put you in. But if you're fundamentally miserable as a person, as a human being, it doesn't matter what money you have. How many rich people do you see who kill themselves, commit suicide? Because the money does not buy happiness. It might buy you happiness for 5 minutes after you've bought a Lamborghini. Bugsy Malone? He talked about putting £330,000 down for a Lamborghini. He was excited at the dealership. He jumped in the car, drove 10 minutes down the road, and he was like, so I'm going back to my life as it is. But on the outside, he's just bought a Lamborghini. So on social media, it's like, yo, dude's killing it. But actually, he's going back to the same home, the same problems. And driving a Lamborghini was exhilarating for 10 minutes when he literally just bought it because of that dopamine hit. But actually, the problems are all still the same.
Peter, thank you today. This has been a beautiful conversation, and we have weaved and danced between many different topics and many different ideas around money and love and men and relationships and how they all intertwine. I'm sure the listeners are wanting to know where they can hear more from you, how they can join your community as well. You mentioned it a few times. I'd love to know more.
Yeah, I mean, my main channel is probably YouTube, A Conversation of Money. I create financial content there. So I've got a segment actually that I started this year, which was Via Questions, is on a Thursday. And so if you have a pressing financial question, you can fill in a Google form. I go through the form every week and then I pick out a question to answer. So that's probably the easiest way of getting hold of me. I've got Instagram, which is Conversation of Money as well. In terms of the community, we're launching in about 4 weeks' time. You can join the wait list for that at this point in time. But yeah, I'm excited about that because it's over the past 5 years of me doing this now. I found that through feedback, people get really stuck with how do I go about doing this? Like controlling the monkey on your back, really, to be honest. Like, I've got this situation. What's the most logical thing to do? That's what we're going to be doing in the community, helping people set goals in a 12-month period and move closer to those goals as possible. So yeah, again, you'll find that information on the YouTube channel.
Thank you, man. Awesome. I'll get those details and put those in the show notes, listeners, so you can find them down there. Again, this is one of those podcast episodes. I think I'm going to say you should share this with somebody, because there's someone in your life in a relationship and they're not talking about money, or maybe, it's a friend of yours, or maybe this is with your partner. You need to sit down and listen to this and talk about how, our value is tied up in our money and how we can talk about that in our relationship. So finally, to say another big thank you to Peter. Great. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. And listeners, I'm going to say ciao, ciao.